Vice President Osinbajo launches telehealth care in Aba, says government implementing universal health coverage for all Nigerians.
Supreme Court fixes date to deliver judgment on Senator Saraki's appeal.
International Criminal Court President visits Nigeria.
Nigeria has put its, as we say, has walked the talk.
And good morning, Nigeria. Today we will focus on how to address illiteracy in Nigeria.
Over the decades, government at various levels initiated and implemented policies and programs aimed at equipping Nigerians with quality education to enhance human resources productivity and economic growth.
Well, in spite of these efforts, about 65 million Nigerians, according to a UNESCO report, still remain illiterate. And of this number, some 35 million of them are said to be adults. This means that more than one-third of Nigerians are actually illiterate. In other words, they can't read or write.
Exactly. And the National Bureau of Statistics data revealed that the three northern geopolitical zones are mostly affected by the high level of illiteracy.
Now, the Minister of Education, Malam Adamu, has described the figure of illiterate Nigerians as alarming, considering the population of the country.
And indeed, as part of measures to stem the tide of illiteracy, the federal government came up with a strategic plan in which the issues of mass literacy is the focal point.
In addition, the National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult Education and Non-Formal Education developed an operational plan for a national mass literacy program targeted at reaching no fewer than 10 million Nigerians.
So why is Nigeria still having high rate of illiterate people? Now, what are the challenges militating against mass literacy? To what extent will these initiatives change the narrative of illiteracy in the country? These are some of the talking points as we discuss ways to tackle illiteracy in Nigeria. This is Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live from the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. Thank you for joining us. I am Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I also join my colleague Kirian in welcoming you to the program, in the course of which we shall have our regular companion segments, and these include newspaper review, business, sports, and others. Of course, we'll probably also take entertainment if we're too pressed for time. But right now, let's go to our colleague who has the highlights of the morning news, and she's Miriam Akpata. Hi, Miriam.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. Okay, we'll start with health matters. The federal government is committed to implementing and achieving its plan of universal health coverage for all Nigerians through the National Health Insurance Scheme. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, who stated this while flagging off the use of mobile phones in healthcare delivery initiated by the Abia state government, says the federal government is ready to partner with any state on people-oriented programs.
That our own NEC will assist every state because poverty in our nation is no respecter of ethnic group, it does not respect religion or party affiliation.
Meanwhile, wife of the President Aisha Buhari has called on the private sector to continue to invest in maternal health for the reduction of child and infant mortality in Nigeria. Mrs. Buhari stated this at the meeting with the private sector in her advocacy towards improving reproductive health in the country.
Today, I'm calling on all private sectors to look out for innovative ways of building partnerships to achieve our goal of improving the health sector.
Maternal newborn child health is fundamental to development, and that is why it is part of our sustainable development goal.
This is what supports. I wanted to take this up at the state level. we cannot be done only at federal. Please do something at the state level. Your Excellency, I quite appreciate what you are doing.
To political matters, the Senate has suspended Senator Ovie Omo Agege, representing Delta Central, for 90 days over his comments on the sequencing of elections, deeming them as slight on the integrity of the Senate. The senator's comments at the news briefing had implied that the National Assembly was against any re-election bid by President Muhammadu Buhari.
After Senator Ovie Omo Agege had admitted guilt by apologizing to the leadership and the entire Senate, the committee was surprised that he changed his mind and took the Senate President and the Senate to court.
Recommendation 1 is that the senator involved, Senator Omo Agege, should withdraw the case. The support group should be disbanded. Number 3 is out of that compassion, we change the recommendation, amend the recommendation of the committee to 90 days.
Now to security matters. The House of Representatives is to investigate the recent armed robbery on some banks and attack on police station in Ofa, Kwara State. The members took the decision during the plenary.
Concerned that the security system could be easily overwhelmed and personal grossly killed in security facilities is an issue that calls for serious concern.
Mr. Speaker, if the banks in this country are not safe, where are we going to go to be safe? Where in Nigeria is safe today?
The Supreme Court has fixed the 6th of July to deliver judgment on an appeal filed by Senate President Abubakar Bukola Saraki. The Senate President filed a suit at Apex Bank challenging the judgment of the Court of Appeal, which ruled that he had a case to answer at the Code of Conduct Tribunal.
They were not allowed by the Court of Appeal, and they appealed against those 3 counts that were allowed by the Court of Appeal. So that's the basis for those.
Amongst the reasons that you might say no case submission is that the ingredients of the offense, they were not sufficiently proved that requires the defendants to put in a defense.
Meanwhile, President of the International Criminal Court, ICC, in The Hague, Netherlands, Chile Osuji, has described his re-election to head the court as a proof of Nigerians' commitment to the rule of law, human rights and accountability. Justice Osuji was at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to meet with the Minister, Jeffrey Oyama.
Nigeria has been very supportive in saying that there's a need for that court to stand and to be supported. And Nigeria has put its, as we say, Nigeria has walked the talk. So if there's a country that's in a position to appreciate that, Nigeria would be, and it is supporting the court.
Extremely proud that, the judge has been elected as president of the International Criminal Court. And as a government, we seek to provide an enabling environment so that all Nigerians can fulfill the tremendous potential.
The Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, has tasked the police in Taraba State to woo the cooperation of the people by being prompt and actively combating crime. The IGP stated this while inaugurating a new mobile police squadron in Takum local government area of the state.
Your service will endear you to the people of the state. You are therefore to make a difference with this deployment. Being a new mobile police squadron, I'm conversant with its challenges. Do not be daunted or worried. I will make every necessary effort to provide solution to most of your problems when deployed.
The Governing Council of the National Center for Women Development, Mary Ekpere, ETA, has been suspended for 3 months in the first instance. A statement signed by the chairman of the Governing Council, Joy Nune, indicates that the action followed a resolution by the board on the 11th of this month. To this end, The Director General has been directed to hand over the most senior director at the center. Well, on that note, we end the news on this morning belt, and we'll go back to Kirian and Kingsley after the break.
Well, you are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA network service. Now to business. The inflation rate, according to National Bureau of Statistics, indicates a drop of 13.34% in March from 14.33% in February. Now let's join Chimobi Walter Naji for more on the business desk.
Welcome to Business News. I'm Chimobi Walter Naji. Let's begin with the inflation rate by National Bureau of Statistics, which indicates a drop to 13.34% in March from 14.33% in February. The figure shows 14 consecutive reduction in inflation rate since January 2017. According to the Bureau, the figures is 0.99% point less than 14.33% recorded in February. The report, however, stated that urban inflation rate eased by 13.75% year-on-year in March from 14.76% recorded in February, while the rural inflation rate also eased by 12.99% in March from 13.96% in February. Experts say with the continuous downward trend in inflation, Nigeria's foreign reserve will further be strengthened.
The average cost of doing business will come down, and if cost of doing business comes down, that means more industries will come up, that means more jobs will be created, unemployment rate will go down, especially youth unemployment. When there is a sign, a positive sign, it means that over a period of time, things will get okay, things will be positive. So what needs to be done for government now is to articulate policies, people-oriented policies that will support job creation, policies that will support small and medium-scale enterprises.
The Nigerian Stock Exchange seems not to disagree with the NBS figures as the equities market closed in the red Thursday. Here is a summary of the trading figures. And that's business news for now. I'm Chimobi Walter Naji. The program continues.
Thank you indeed, Chimobi. Newspaper review is next on Good Morning Nigeria.
Newspaper reviewer Baya Toyebe is right here with us in the studios for today's edition. Baya, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kirian, and good morning, Nigeria.
All right, we have stories on the front pages of the 4 or 5 papers that we have with us this morning. Some of it, of course, dealing with bloodbath in different parts of the country. Let's begin with the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint newspaper has, just below the nameplate of the paper, fireworks in Senate over President's comment on Gaddafi. That story jumps from the front page to page 6. But the lead story comes with a kicker: midnight attacks. Gunmen kill 45 in Benue, Taraba, and Zamfara. Dozens missing. That's the rider. Again, details of that story can be found on page 6. And then for a story also related to security, you just go to the headlines below the photograph there of a robbery. Banks to resume in 2 months. Of a robbery. Banks to resume in 2 months, and that's attributed to the Olofa. Details of that story on page 7. And security, stop interagency rivalry, Senate tells Buhari. And back again to security matters on the front page of the Authority newspaper. Below the photograph there showing the Vice President and the Governor of Abia, it says, death toll in Benue, Nasarawa and Taraba killings hits 51. That story is in greater detail on page 3. Carry on.
All right. Now we have here the New Telegraph, and it is a story of a bloodbath, as rightly pointed out. If the main headline here says, bloodbath in Zamfara, Taraba, Benue, with 2 riders, 92 killed, many injured, houses burnt, uproar over Buhari's claim on herdsmen. Pages 2 and 8 have that story. And below the photograph we have here, Senate suspends pro-Buhari senator, disbands parliamentary support group. Your action is sub judice, says Omo Agege. That's the man that has been suspended. Now, that's on page 2 of the New Telegraph. And above the nameplate, you have anger and frustration over poor telecom services. We are helpless, say operators. And details of that story is on page 5 of the New Telegraph. And on the Guardian, just below the nameplate, would like to, maybe Bio should come in here before this, or do I just go ahead and give you what we have on Guardian so that he can now?
Let's
all right, now uproar in Senate over Buhari blaming Gaddafi for killings. That's the same story we have in other newspapers. But with 3 riders here, he is totally incompetent, says Abaribe. Then Lawan disagrees and demands apology. President has embarrassed us, says Fayose of the Pidasi governor of Ekiti State. And below the photograph here on the Guardian, Nigeria's death sentence is highest in sub-Saharan Africa. All right, Bayo.
Yes, let's talk about the gory picture we are getting from the newspapers. There's a report about 20 lives being lost in Zamfara. This happened in Kuru and Yarkuka villages in the same Anka local government area. You recall that about 2 weeks ago, 30 persons were killed there, and also some 2 officers, army officers, were killed in that same area. A spokesman for the Zamfara Police Command, Shehu Sani, says the gunmen had actually raided a situation whereby miners were in the field and they were mining, and they raided them and killed them. There's also been a reported killings in which 15 persons were killed in a place that is called Janden Kula village in Wukari local government area of Taraba State. Governor Darius Isiaku says he was woken up at 1 a.m. and told about this distress call about this attack. But luckily, soldiers, the military in Takum, were able to intervene and had actually stemmed that. Also in Benue, a detachment of riot police had to be dispatched to Ukembe in local government area. Again, is violence and violence and violence. And in Offa, where Kingsley read this report about the banks having closed because of the robbery of 5 banks and 1 community bank, they are not likely to resume until after about 2 weeks.
So the report is talking about 2 months, actually.
2 months.
And this is attributed to the Olofa.
And usually when the banks close like that, the people in that whole area will either have to travel to Oshobo or Ilorin for their financial transaction. And Offa is the second commercial town in Kwara State. And that was why the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives yesterday said specifically that if the economy of goes under, it means the whole economy of Kwara State. Meanwhile, it's 1 week since the attack now yesterday, and some youths demonstrated in Offa yesterday wearing crepe and mourning the death of their colleagues. The Inspector General of Police have been kind to dispatch 3 units of mobile police. The challenge now is that the governor in Kwara State has warned about the politicization of that unfortunate event. He has promised that a police station will be built and taken away from the market area where it is currently located. But the current challenge is that 3 units of mobile police that are deployed will require accommodation if they are to remain there to provide security. So the Kwara State government must be up and doing to do something about accommodation for the 3 units of mobile police.
And I'm sure you must have also seen the video circulating on the social media, yes, which will appear to have been a clip from a CCTV from recording parts of the robbery incident. The scale of the operation was not just simply frightening, but also audacious on the part of the robbers. It looks like they took their time to map out precisely what they were going to do, confident that there might be no challenge or any resistance from the security agencies.
Yes, and the police have swooped in very strongly on them. Presently, the IGP's investigating team has been on the location, and they have spread their dragnet as far back as far as to Lagos, to the whole of the north central of Nigeria, and even up to the northeast. And indications are that at the last count, initially one was arrested around Igosun, 6 within Offa. As at the last count, about 12 of them have been arrested, and the police is not leaving any stone unturned. Come to think of it, anytime there is such calamity and policemen are involved, they become extra vigilant because they imagine that it could have been mean. You have 9 police officers killed. And
one wants to wonder as to why the rise in criminality in those parts of the country. It has become a recurring decimal that week in, week out, there is this killings, not just killing, mass killing.
In the North Central.
What would you attribute that to, considering what has been trending, in the newspaper and of course in the air?
Possible indications. One is that in recent times, the army and the armed forces and other security agencies have made deliberate attempts to purge their rank of some of them that they suspect have been in criminality. Unfortunately, the way they are disposed of pose a danger to society itself. The second thing is a high level of educated graduates who don't have work. They become easy access to criminality. So some of those that have been arrested, you will be shocked to find out that is why it is difficult to track them, because they are deploying their level of education and intelligence in committing this criminality.
We just wish the police authorities the very best, in getting on top of this situation. There was the robbery incident that took place at the bank in Owerri sometime in the past, and the CCTV footage also showed the faces of the robbers. I think the alleged leader was caught at the funeral ceremonies of his father, and I think he was splashing money or whatever he was doing. We do hope that they can get on top of this so that everyone feels safe. Let's return to Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint newspaper, now below the photograph on the front page there, you have ex-governor Aliu's trial, witness collapses in court. That story is on page 9. And Bayo, this is heartwarming from The Economist. It says inflation drops to 13% in March. Details can be found on page 33. Of course, it's about 13.334, I believe. That's inflation has dropped now to around about 13% in March. Abacha loot, that's the kicker for that. Reps probe $17 million proposed lawyers' fees. That's on page 14. And troops kill 3 insurgents in rescue 33.
Well, we just have a few of them here before we go into the editorials. On the New Telegraph, below the nameplate, police declare Senator Shehu Sani wanted for murder. On page 6, court jails magistrate over 50,000 naira bribe on page 35, and graduate imprisoned in hospital over 400,000 naira bail. I also have Nigerians eager, or rather express anger over alleged Randy lecturer.
The Randy lecturer issue has been trending on the social media, and one newspaper is reporting that the lecturer has gone into hiding. Another is reporting that the students who allegedly recorded and posted it on the social media has been asked to come forward to provide evidence for it. And talking about the case you reported about Senator Shehu Sani, the police command in Kaduna says he is describing as a person of interest in the case that was reported, criminal conspiracy by the wine div of the Nigerian army. Well, the good news about inflation, well, inflation has dropped 13.34%. At the end of February, it was as high as 14.76. And the indications are that the inflation is dropping in the urban area as well as in the rural areas. In urban areas, it's dropping from 14.76 to 13.75, and in the rural areas from 13.96 that it was before to 12.99. If the trend continues, there are indications that by the end of the year, inflation could reach a lower double figure and maybe come into higher single digits. towards the end. That will be about 9% or thereabout.
Yes, we had a single-digit inflation rate in the past.
Yes.
And there was heartwarming,
So
of course, which means
that
the prices are stabilizing.
Yes.
Just before we signing you up, the Authority newspaper, the lead story said, oil produces status, Enugu battles Anambra and Senate. Now, the Nigerian pilot is the source of our editorial this morning, and it's on page 3. Nigeria's exploding population. That's the headline for that editorial, and the editorial says, in part, that rapid population growth rate like ours, with all the above factors, is a threat, especially with poor living conditions orchestrated by bad cyclic economic policies, poor political decisions, and governance systems, which are breeding poverty daily.
Well, we see that 198 million
yes,
without a census.
Don't be so scared.
How credible
that
is that?
Is a projection. By the time we do census, we will get the correct figure. But don't be surprised. It could be less, it could be more. Yeah. But the alarm that has been raised in that editorial is that in 1967, our population growth rate was said to be about 17.3%. And in 2017, it's said to be about 49.4%. That is very serious. And what they are saying that by the year 2050, you will have 70% of our population living in the cities. And you recall that the Federal Executive Council just this week, the Minister of Water Resources was raising an alarm, which is like a kind of a state of emergency in the situation of water supply, particularly in our urban areas. So those are serious issues to take care of our population. Before Malthusian's theory, you remember? That economic theory of population growth that gets out of hand sets in for us.
That's right, that's Thomas Malthus. But there were also mitigating factors that ensured that the Malthusian theory didn't come to light.
And that is what we have to embark upon now.
That's right, but we have no new territories to discover. Australia was available for them, and of course there were also new advances in agriculture, which we can take advantage of in order to feed our growing population. But the country has to worry about the exploding population. We can't be bragging about how many we have. And then you also have very many pockets in areas that ordinarily should be affluent, pockets of poverty.
We should always brag about how efficient we are. It's not how large we are, how big we are, how many we are, but not how efficient and how excellent we are.
And there's no birth control in the country where everybody, gets as many children as possible.
Babangida tried to put a cap on that at 4, and he set a personal example, I believe. Baya Toebe, we'd like to thank you for being with us. We hope you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you very much.
See you on Monday. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are discussing one of the issues today arising from our population, also the exponential growth, if you like, at the rate of illiteracy in the country.
Thanks for staying with us. For some time now, the issue of illiteracy has become a source of concern to many people in Nigeria. And to this end, governments and now non-governmental organizations have been collaborating to change the narrative. Correspondent Oyeyemi Ajayi put together this report as a backgrounder for our conversation this morning.
Since independence, government at all levels evolved policies and programs meant to ensure that Nigerians get proper education, to ensure them contribute meaningfully to national development. Despite these initiatives, Nigeria is still recording high number of illiterate people. According to UNESCO statistics, 65 million Nigerians remain illiterate. Out of this figure, 35 million are adults. The National Bureau of Statistics data indicate that Northeast, Northwest, and North Central have the highest rates, with Yobe State leading in the illiteracy level. Nigeria is ranked among the E9 countries in the world in view of our illiteracy rate and high population. Minister of Education Malam Adamu, who expressed concern over the issue, described the rate as alarming considering the nation's population. Some analysts attribute the high rate of illiteracy in Nigeria to a number of factors, which include lack of quality schools and teachers, inadequate instructional materials, and lukewarm attitude of some parents, especially those who are equally illiterate, as well as insecurity among others. As a way of reversing the trend, the National Commission on Mass Literacy, Adult Education and Non-Formal Education developed an operational plan for a national mass literacy program aimed at reaching to no fewer than 10 million Nigerians. Aside from these, the federal government came up with a strategic plan with a view to addressing the issue of illiteracy in the country. What has gone wrong with previous and current initiatives? What are the effects of these on our national development? These are some of the questions guests will provide answers to as we discuss ways to check high rate of illiteracy in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background report. Now we have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as our Lagos Network Center to discuss on this issue in greater detail. First, we'd like to welcome Professor Abba Haladu. He is Executive Secretary, National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education. Professor Haladu, pleasure to have you on. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and then we also have with us here in the studios the Dean of the Faculty of Education, University of Abuja. That's Professor Musa Mesamari. Professor Mesamari, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Okay.
And we equally have Stephen Onyekwelu, National Program Officer on Revitalizing Adult and Youth Literacy in Nigeria, UNESCO. Good to have you join us this morning, sir.
Thank you very much.
And from our Lagos studio, we are being joined this morning by Professor Jerry Agada, former Minister of State for Education. Thanks, Prof, for finding time to join us this morning.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
On the program, we're getting back again on the education issue, especially because we have had to deal with two critical aspects. First, a few weeks ago, we had on Good Morning Nigeria the topic, schooling without learning. And last week, we also took on the crisis of out-of-school children. And today, we're dealing with how to much more effectively tackle the high rate of illiteracy in the country. There are some projections indicating that at least no fewer than 1/3 of the population of Nigerians are illiterate. But first, is illiteracy synonymous with education? Or is literacy synonymous with education? What is illiteracy and what is lack of education? Let's begin with Professor Haladu and then get Professor Mesamari's take on this.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, if you talk of literacy, it's not merely the skill of reading and writing, but it is a transformational process which enables an individual to think effectively and act appropriately with a view to resolving development challenges that bedevils that individual and his society. And the lack of it, that is illiteracy. That is the inability to read and write and effectively think and act towards solving one's own existential challenges. So in effect, the need for an individual to read and write opens up an opportunity to acquire knowledge, to acquire education in the course of living an effective life and realizing sustainable development objectives. And where individuals do not have this skill, then they will be lacking in knowledge, in skills to live a healthy and effective life.
Well, I think there are dimensions to your definition, which will lead us into asking Professor Mesari whether he agrees with this definition, or would you give another perspective to it as we are trying to understand the difference, between illiteracy and education, or whether they are synonymous, as Kinsley put it?
Well, in as much as we would want to say they are not synonymous, but you discover that the relationship between illiteracy and education is just like that of the egg and the chicken. In education, we talk of general acquisition of life skills to cope with existential problems, life skills generally, which includes education. But also in the course of understanding literacy, we say we begin by learning to read, and then you read to learn. So you discover that one complements the other.
All right, let's bring in Stephen Onyekwelu. Let's have your own perspective on this. Literacy and education, lack of literacy, which is illiteracy, and then lack of education.
Thank you very much. Like Professor Hallard said, literacy simply is the ability to read, write, and compute. Though in the modern time it has gone beyond just the acquisition of the skill of reading, writing, and computation. It has gone beyond that to include the empowerment of the individual to be able to contribute meaningfully to self-development, community development, and national development. Now, like he said, the inability to read, write, and compute constitutes what we say is illiteracy. A person is illiterate when you are not able to read, write, compute in any language. That constitutes illiteracy. You are not able to read and write and compute perhaps in a given language.
In other words, all three must be present, because there's some persons who would argue that, all right, people are proficient in their native languages, and therefore that may not be a factor. But you are saying now ability to read, write, and compute in that particular language. I'm sure in our different languages, we know how to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know, Kirian, can you count that in Igbo? All right, let's bring in.
Let's go to Lagos, where we have Professor Jerry Agada. So you are former Minister of State for Education, and we would like to have your own perspective to this definition of what really is illiteracy and what is the connection or the nexus between illiteracy and education.
Thank you very much. Like my other colleagues have said, the truth of the matter is, the relationship between education, illiteracy, and all that are just a matter of semantics. They are about the same thing. The ability to read and write, decode what you are writing or reading, translates to education. Because if you don't have the education, you will not be in a position to do all these things. And mind you that my colleagues have mentioned the relative influences of reading and writing, translating to even poverty of the environment, because inability to read and write translates to people being poor in health, in other things. Therefore, the right thing to say is that both literacy, illiteracy, education, they are all, within around the same environment. What we need to do is to ensure that if the level of illiteracy among our people is increasing, as has already been indicated, what do we do to reverse, the trend, so that people will be knowledgeable to be able to read and write? That's why I say that they are about the same thing, because when we are talking of that one, we are saying you are knowledgeable, which is education. So the truth of the matter is that they are all, perambulating around the same situation. Thank you very much.
All right, Professor Jerry Agada, thank you very much also. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's now come back to our guests here in the Abuja studios. The figures we're hearing, of course, is some 65 million Nigerians are said to be illiterate. That's a UNESCO report. I'm sure there will be other figures indicating what the challenges are with regard to literacy in the country. Professor Haladu, why is it that the figures of illiterate Nigerians, why is it that the figure is not declining? Instead, it would appear to be accelerating.
Well, there are many reasons for this. One, as we all know, the population is increasing. We have about 2.8%, some say 3% growth rate, one of the highest in the world. And it is estimated that by 2050, Nigeria will overtake the United States of America and become the third most populous country in the world. So the population is increasing, while the efforts being made to tackle the challenge of illiteracy is not going commensurate with the population increase. That is to say, unfortunately, the nation has not been up and doing in really addressing the illiteracy challenge. We are only saying it verbally, but we have been putting concrete actions to ensure that illiteracy is eradicated in the country.
But Kingsley, I think as a former Minister of State for Education, that Professor Agada could bail us out with this particular question you put to Professor Haladu. Professor Agada, let's return to you there in Lagos, and we wanted to speak to the fact that instead of decreasing, the rate is increasing, accelerating. With your experience as former Minister of State for Education, how would you put this? You know, because the increase, the rate is high, and as population increases, the rate continues to increase. Would it be because of inability to put in place measures, you know, that could tackle the accelerating nature of illiteracy in Nigeria?
Well, a lot of measures have been put in place, you know, to reverse the order. But like we are saying, the population is increasing, and you discover that the effort is not good enough, you know, to be able to match what we are expecting. Take, for instance, as a former Minister of State for Education, I know the efforts we put at the Federal Ministry of Education to ensure that, you know, the dwindling reading habits amongst Nigerians are improved upon so that everybody will be in a position to read. That was why we flagged off what we call the National Action Committee on Read campaign, which is being replicated in all over the states of the Federation. Apart from that effort from the Federal Ministry, there are other non-governmental agencies that are also contributing to making sure that our illiteracy level is reduced to a level that people will say we are trying. But no matter what effort you put in place, you discover that they are not even good enough as a result of so many other factors. Take, for instance, situations in schools, lack of you know, facilities, resources, lack of qualified teachers, good libraries, and so on and so forth. So the issue here is that everybody has a commitment to make in terms of trying to make sure that, you know, the illiteracy level among Nigerians is reduced. It's not just left for a particular organization to say Ministry of Education will do it, and that is all. Parents are involved. Everybody is involved, because if you talk of reading and writing, it occurs across every segment of the society, including parents. You discover that parents who are illiterate, who cannot read and write, the situation from their homes for their children becomes, you know, worrisome, because they cannot contribute to anything in trying to help. But where reading cuts across everybody, you discover that, yes, it can be helped by so many factors, not just Ministry of Education, not just education stakeholders, but everybody. So my advice is that anytime we are talking of illiteracy, reading, writing, let us not cast our minds to situations that happens in the school situation only. Anybody can write at any point in time. Anybody can be literate or illiterate at any point in time, whether you're an old man, a young man, or whatever. And whatever situation you find yourself, you should be in a position to exercise reading and writing, which will translate to literacy amongst people. That is my view about it.
All right, Professor Gada, thank you very much. We'll come back to you. Let's bring in Professor Maisemari. From your perspective, why is it that the level of illiteracy in the country is not declining?
Yeah, I quite agree that the population increase is one factor, but the major factor is lack of policy continuation. I remember even in the First Republic, in almost every community, you have the non-formal education sector being very vibrant, in which you had people going for adult education, and it was very serious. Traditional rulers that were not educated or were not literate were made to go to school, at least adult schools. Women were also encouraged to do so. But today, that is no more. Agreed, we have adult and non-formal sectors in our local government. But you ask, what do they do? Nothing. In fact, anybody posted to that area sees it as a punishment. We should not be, because it's a very important factor of our Ministry of Education. I would want to say, with some kind of reservation, I am not too sure, even at the national level, the kind of attention given to the Mass Literacy Commission is the same with what is given to other aspects, other sectors of the education. So there is a kind of lip service going on right from the government, and I think that should be addressed properly. In addition to the rot in our education system, particularly the other time we were talking of the quality of teachers we have, teachers that can read themselves, how would they produce students that can read? So these are some of the things. And then the facilities. I would tell you, when I was in primary school in the 60s, I could read after my primary 2. But today you have pupils that go to JSS 1 and 2. They cannot read even the letters of the alphabet correctly. So what is the problem? There is that problem of lack of good teachers, lack of facilities. When I talk of instructional facilities, books are not there. We only try to say, let children enroll and go through schools without school going through them. I think that's a very challenging factor. And we need to dig into why.
And Stephen, I was going to ask him, because as a UNESCO officer in charge of revitalizing adult and youth literacy in Nigeria, you will be in the know. Professor Maisemari raised a very pertinent issue here, because I also recall that in the early 90s, when some of us are still in the university, the Onitsha market traders were then known as the illiterate traders. But they were trooping into universities at that point, getting education. Today, if you go to the Onitsha market, more than half of owners of those big-time shops are graduates. But it's fizzled out, as Professor Maisemari recalled. So what would be the cause as a UNESCO boss?
Thank you very much. As much I agree with the points so far raised, I just want to add the issue of apathy, the perception people are beginning to have about education, about literacy. After literacy, what next? Acquiring the skill of reading, writing, and computation, where does it lead you to? In the formal system, you see graduates being turned out of the higher institutions. Majority of them are roaming the street, no job. The younger ones will want to ask, Uncle, why are you in this position? You've graduated from school, over years, no job. Now, such a child asking the uncle such question will not have the zeal to go to school. So it is a kind of situation where people don't see the value of education as it used to be in those days. parents are beginning to say, of what essence is there to send my child to school and after graduation, no job? Education, illiteracy in quote, is supposed to empower the person, give you skill, opportunity to be able to live a better life. But after you have acquired these skills and there is nothing, no job on ground, it becomes disheartening. It becomes discouraging. And I want to also add the issue of insurgency currently. We are talking about why the rise in number of illiterate people in Nigeria. You look at the north, especially the northeast, most homes, people are homeless, they are out of their places, the children are in IDP camps, they cannot access education, and such people are out of school, thus increasing the number of illiterate people within the society. I think this, a few I can add to the points already raised. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen Oyekolo. You raised some other perspectives, but I would like to return to Professor Haladu. To what extent can we blame increasing population for also the rising rate of illiteracy in the country? Is it that illiterates are breeding illiterates? Nigeria is not the most populous nation in the world, and elsewhere where people are more in number, the rate of illiteracy is also not necessarily rising. So where do we actually place the fact that our population is growing and therefore our illiterate population is also growing? Take a look, for instance, at some examples where countries have been able to deal with the issues of illiteracy. Cuba is one such example. Zimbabwe, under Robert Mugabe, I mean, no matter what he did later with the economy of that country, grew the rate of literacy in the country.
Well, I think still the issue of population growth is a factor, of course, among other factors, because if you take the E9 countries, that is the 9 countries with the highest number of population, also having the highest number of illiterate people, including, of course, China. Currently in China, there are over 200 million illiterate people. So, despite the fact that they are making effort in all fronts, but the population factor actually can be linked to this high number of illiterate people. So it is with us equally that rising population is quite a factor. But of course, together with other factors, the fact that, like I said earlier on, we have not been able to do the needful, and it becomes a vicious cycle. Of course, an illiterate parent, an illiterate family is most likely to raise illiterate children because they have not seen the importance, or the access is simply not there for their children to acquire education and become literate and educated. And as such, with growing pulverized poverty, for example, among some families in the rural areas, the lack of access to schools, and the fact that the parents themselves are illiterate, you find that the end result will be more illiterate population. So the issue of a rising population and the inability on our part, for example, to tackle the challenge head-on contributes to the increasing number of illiterate people. And this is so not only in Nigeria, but in most sub-Saharan African countries, because UNESCO last year notes that as other regions in the world are making progress in the fight against illiteracy, unfortunately, sub-Saharan Africa, of which Nigeria is included, is actually not doing much to tackle the issue.
Now I think, sorry, let's take a cue from what Mr. Onyekwalu did point out, when he was making his own contribution, and that has to do with the human factor in this. Some persons may not be willing to get educated in the first place. Some may decide that he doesn't want that when it comes to reading and writing per se, but of course has the education enough to give him some skills that can sustain his life. Because several millionaires, especially in the eastern part of the country, they didn't quite go to formal school, and they're functioning effectively, both internationally. and all of that. So now let's talk about the value judgment. Is it a contributor to this rise in illiteracy? I'd like Professor Mesemari to come in here.
I quite agree that value judgment could influence, but most importantly, we believe, or I believe, that the right policies are not properly implemented. Those who are not educated and they are making it, they know that if they were educated, they would have made it better. For example, you are referring to my brothers in the East, where you have somebody who is almost illiterate, controlling billions. But what do you find? Who is the person writing the receipt for him? Don't you think he could be, exploited through that? He knows he is handicapped, but he can't help himself. So, in as much as there is that, but I want us to look at this issue of population and what other factors that would want to, interfere. If the government knows that we have a growth rate of a particular percentage, and of course our agencies that have the statistics, National Population, National Bureau for Statistics, there should be kind of synergy with other governments, agencies or ministries. What is the Ministry of Education benefiting from that statistics? Shouldn't that impact on their budgeting? Shouldn't that impact on their planning? I want to say the schools I knew, or the non-formal education, let me just put that one bluntly, because I'm going back to even literacy in our local languages that we had. How many new centers have been opened? In my own local government, the older ones that we knew had been closed. So we're not talking of new ones being opened. So these are the issues. Instead of knowing that our population is increasing, therefore more centers should be opened, the centers that existed are being closed for lack of attention, for whatever reason. And I expect, if Ministry of Education is aware of that, what is our legislators doing with regards to that information? Shouldn't they think of increasing our budget in education to tackle that? But what do we have? Our budget in education is rather going downward from 10% to 8%, and who knows this year, it might go to 7%. So these are the issues, lack of synergy. And I think that synergy should be pursued in order to tackle our challenges. Yes, it is not a one-shot problem, but it's a problem that recycles itself. Thank you.
Professor Mesemari, thanks a lot. Just before we bring in the other guests, and by the way, there are already reactions coming in from our viewers. Before we take those tweets, are we discussing here a national problem, or we are discussing what some would describe as a regional problem? Is illiteracy pervasive throughout the entire nation? Do we have an illiteracy map, if you like, of the country, so that if you want to deploy resources, you will say these are the areas most impacted, and therefore you know what to do? Let's bring in Professor Haladu again.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, illiteracy is a general problem in the country, of course, with regional disparities. The available data that we have shows that the northeastern part of the country has a literacy level of barely 40%. And this is followed by the northwestern part of the country with 50% literacy rate, and therefore 50% illiteracy rate. The north central states with 53% literacy rate, and therefore 47% illiteracy rate. And then it goes to the southeast with about 70% literacy rate, south-south 71%, and southwest 81%. So it is a general problem, much as there are regional disparities.
All right, thank you very much. Professor Jerry Agada, let's bring you in again here on this conversation from our Lagos network studios. We are seeing from hearing rather from Professor Haladu regional disparities, but still it's a national concern. Where is it that we have not been able to tackle our population growth rates by also dealing with the accelerating rate of illiteracy? What has gone wrong?
I think, like one of my colleagues said on the program, he said that some people are not being interested in reading or writing because they feel that after all, at the end of your programs, there is no job. I want to put it on record that reading writing, or general education, as we talk about, is for self-emancipation. If we say that a good reader is a good leader, we say that with your education, even without money, you become self-actualized and you'll be able to have your own focus. Not necessarily because you have education, therefore you match it with money. And once the money is not there, education is not important. I don't want people to think that way. Let us feel that it is important to have the education, to have the literacy level that we think is necessary. The next point is, getting a policy to work again. Like we have said on this program, the situations that had existed in those days where you have, teaching around adult literacy programs and so on in the villages, they are no longer there. Why did we disconnect and continue from where things are not moving properly? So to me, there is nothing wrong with re-engineering the whole process again, even in as much as I know that, yes, proper funding is important. But even if funding is there and the policy is not, gotten right, you will discover that we will continue to be wallowing in the same lamentation of saying that we are decreasing in terms of literacy or illiteracy. So let our policy formulators know that things are wrong. Let them know that facilities that can bring about this thing should be put there. Proper libraries, proper facilities in our schools, good resources, quality teachers, and so on and so forth. Once we can get our policy makers to know that these are the factors that can bring about this thing. Somebody has given an example of places like Cuba, Zimbabwe, and wherever, where even though population is increasing, they matched it with actions and policies that have helped them, to, march along with level of literacy or illiteracy. Why can't we get such policies right instead of looking at a single factor that because this one is not done, things will not go properly? I have said that is everybody's responsibility. Let us not look at education or reading and writing as a situation that can take place only in the school system. It can take place anywhere. In those days when some of us were in primary schools or secondary schools, we had the impression that if you talk of adult education, it's a type of education that is not necessary. It's for the people who are old, and therefore it's not the type of education we were pursuing. It was later we understand that it's the same thing. Let the adult and mass literacy organization, institution, try to let people know the importance of what we are talking in terms of adult education, mass literacy, because it's for everybody. And of course, I will go back to our policy makers, Federal Ministry of Education, our legislators, wherever they are. Let them understand the importance of this thing that we are talking about, so that policies will be formulated to get things at least right from where we think we have gotten it wrong. It is never too late to start at any point. And I think if we do that, we should be able to match our intention with our interest.
Professor Agada, thank you indeed. That's the former Minister of State for Education, talking from the point of experience. And also, gentlemen, it's been a good conversation this morning. Professor Haladu is still here with us, and of course, Professor Mesa Marie and Mr. Onyekwali of UNESCO. Thank you all for your contribution so far. But many Nigerians are beginning to react to our conversation this morning, and it's only it will only be interesting for us to now know what they are talking about. And first here I have Mike Anyakwo, who says that education is key to national development. Education, as they say, is key to wealth. A country with good education is sure for her future. Illiteracy is an aberration. Kudos to the federal government on its present efforts to eradicate illiteracy in the country. State governments should also follow suit.
Habib S. Usman has this tweet, Habib S. Umar, rather, has this tweet. Now, we need to totally revamp our education sector if we really want to make illiteracy history in Nigeria, plus end poverty and birth control.
All right, I have here Juku Zoba Jonathan. He says, Chibuzo Jonathan. He says that to tackle the high rate of illiteracy in Nigeria, we must first make our education sector attractive to every Nigerian. We must make education free and compulsory to secondary school level.
Now, Olubade Damola has this tweet. As we speak now, from UNESCO, about 65 million Nigerians are illiterate. Government should see education as a serious deal by setting realistic goals and embracing open distance learning and encourage accountability.
And then from Dele Jack Solomon, I will comment firstly. Before I comment firstly, let me thank you, your crew, the moderators and background staff for the wonderful work of bringing to the fore topical issues that bother on the nation and the lives of its persevering citizenry. This is the way to make Nigeria great again. God bless NTA.
Now, Festus Akimboyewa has this. There is no doubt that illiteracy is a barrier to a fair society. The federal government must work with state governments and the private sector to ensure there is significant investment in addressing the problem. Time to act and address illiteracy is a top priority right now.
From Omar Bolahan, it's unequivocal that the illiteracy level in Nigeria is at the apogee, particularly from the northern hemisphere. This, however, is a corollary of a number of factors, one of which is birth control. We must go on serious awareness campaign to educate people on the need for birth control.
Now, Mutana Farouk has this, says lack of education is a major scourge that ravages our society, not illiteracy. Now, the claimed rate of illiteracy in Nigeria is exaggerated, except I don't know what illiteracy is. There are many literate Nigerians, but not educated. The system of our education is to be blamed. I'm sure if Mutana Farouk was here at the beginning of the discussion, we asked our various guests to either differentiate, distinguish between, or otherwise find a coterminus between literacy and education, or illiteracy and being uneducated. So they've already dealt with that particular issue. It's Professor Jerry Agada summed it up by saying that, well, it's all semantic issues that we're dealing with.
Yes,
let's continue.
Yes. Now, Daniel Abiodu says the high level of illiteracy in the country, even after a long time of independence, is as a result of conspiracy and deliberate move by some of our political class or some members of the political class to keep the vast majority of the citizens at that level so as to continue to manipulate them.
Victor Oyoswama has this tweet. Now, if 1/3 of Nigerians are illiterate out of a population we now hear of 198 million, then it is alarming. Apart from poverty and corruption, one of the causes is overpopulation. We need a population policy to check parents to have children they can cater for. The irony is that the poor seem to have many more children. All right, so those are the tweets that we have in the meantime. Of course, there are quite many. We will take, just before we return to Professor Jerry Agada at our Lagos Network studios, before we also sign him off. Professor Memasari, you talked about policy gaps and also lack of continuity. How can we therefore explain what we have in the country today? I give you, let me front load my question as follows. Since about the year 1999 or 2000, we have the Universal Basic Education Commission. Now, the commission, also headed by Professor Haladu, is in existence. We also have a commission, I hope it's still in existence, one for nomadic education for the northern part of the country and also for the riverine areas. And you have SUBEB, which outgrowth from UBEC. You also have TED Fund, which was created by the administration of General Ibrahim Babangida, which also came up with the nomadic education thing. Now you have TED Fund specifically for tertiary institutions and TED Fund for the lower levels as we have them. Why, in spite of all of these entities and the motions and apparent movements, we are still dealing with this level of illiteracy?
Well, like I said, lack of synergy is the greatest problem. If only people are given the opportunity to synergize with one another across these agencies, they will be able to see the dire needs that we have in specific areas and address them. Either helping the agency that is responsible to do that instead of creating the kind of rivalry. Each one's, let me have this as my budget. You see the budget as your own budget, not a national budget. Budgets should be seen as national budgets for national development. But where the commission, either third fund, looks at it, oh, that's my own budget to do my own work. So he wants to take the budget meant for mass literacy commission and add to his own so that he can perform better, forgetting that the vacuum that will be created in mass literacy would affect national development. So synergy to me is the key. Let's appreciate one another. Let's take our assignment as national assignments, not assignments that we would get glory for what we are doing in our small enclaves.
Now, gentlemen, it is apparent, that we have the entities, as Kinsley mentioned, and these entities, their responsibilities are also geared towards achieving one particular goal, making Nigerians literate. That is the bottom line. But it is not happening, yet those entities are still in existence. And I'd like Mr. Onyekulu to come in here, because as a UNESCO person, you're a research fellow. And of course, you must have researched into what policies other nations applied to achieve the level of literacy that they have in their country. Now, what is wrong? Is it the entities or lack of synergy, according to Mr. Professor Mesomari? What's your take?
Thank you very much. He's also right, but I want us to actually hit the nail on the head. For me, we have good policies. I have a copy of the National Policy on Education here. If you go to page 30 of it, it's spelled out what should be done as far as non-formal education is concerned. The policies are on ground. I think, from my perspective, the issue is implementation. Proper implementation, effective implementation of policies. I have heard oftentimes people say that Nigeria has good policies, not only in education, in every sphere. The issue is implementation. Now, for instance, how is education funded in Nigeria? Let us actually address that issue. I know Prof. may not want to address the issue of funding, maybe it might appear, but the issue remains that before you effectively implement, there should be funding. There was a study carried out by Professor Timothy Odiaka. He reported World Bank figure in 2013, where 20 countries were sampled. How much do they budget for education? The annual budget, national budget, how much of it is allocated to education? That study showed that Nigeria was the least. Out of the 20 countries sampled, Nigeria had 9%.
Yes, Mr. Onyekulu, but part of the issue that Professor Mesomari has raised is the fact that some of these agencies are working in silos. Each one, wants to take control of his own budget, and there appears to be no synergy. Just before we come back to you again, let's go very quickly to Professor Jerry Agada. I mean, he's also functioned in this milieu in the past. Professor Jerry Agada, in our Lagos Network studios, we know that you're leaving us shortly after you give this response. Tell us something. How do we explain the plenitude of agencies and, if you like, the right policies, and yet, we're having this spike in our rate of illiteracy?
Well, the agencies exist for the purpose of working together so that at the end of the day, all their efforts will add value to our education, both literacy or whatever. So to me, the mere fact that the institutions are there is not a problem. The important thing, like somebody said, is the implementation. I can tell you that some of these institutions, even after their budget, to release this money so that they will be able to carry out the programs that they have put in the budget is a problem. The money is not there. So what do you want the agencies to do? Some of them, if you go there, they just stay. And of course, each agency is supposed to do a budget that is supposed to translate its own business into a productive arrangement that can add value to our education system. So if you say that each institution is doing on its own, they are not synergizing, well, you are correct. The important thing is to advise that they should synergize after they would have done their own individual arrangements, so that the collectivity of all the actions from the various agencies will do the trick. But to say that you can just be doing a budget which will be reading the national interest, not just the organization which you are superintending, I don't think that is proper enough. Do your own, let others do their own, then we'll put them together and see how it translates. But the long and short of the whole stories that we are telling is getting the policy right, so that where we know that we have gone wrong, let us start. It's never too late to begin at any point in time. Why did we disconnect all those things that we were doing in those days that, you know, were making things proper for us? Why did we disconnect with them? If we feel that, yes, our population is increasing and those factors are no longer there, and we feel the need to revive them, let us go back and revive them. Let the Ministry of Education or whoever is concerned know that we need money, a lot of resources, to translate our policies into reality, not just to put them on paper, and then at the end of the day, money is not released for whatever you have put in your program to implement. By the time all the agencies you mentioned are, operating effectively, I can tell you that things will change for the better.
Speak from the point of experience now. You've been there as the Minister of State for Education. What was the problem? You talked about collectivity, that is after the individual agencies must have put something together. You now collect them and direct them to the proper channel. Now, what was your experience? What was the problem, when you were there, and what was the effort, made, to see how the synergy, to make the synergy work at the very time you were the Minister of State?
Problems that time was this issue of funding. You discover that some of the agencies, they cry, cap in hand, just to make sure that whatever is meant for them is given to them so that they can translate their intentions to action. But more often than not, the money is not released. And therefore, what do we do? And, as a former Minister of Education, I can tell you that, yes, you have the intention, but sometimes, even as a minister, that your intention cannot, be carried out effectively. I remember when there were strikes all over. The universities were on strike, teachers were on strike, and so on and so forth. And each time I went to the Federal Executive Council to say that the way they are treating teachers is not proper, let us do this one. They started calling me headmaster, that my own interest is to be talking about teachers. But one has to talk about them. I have been a headmaster, I've been a teacher all my life. Therefore, if I go to the Federal Executive Council and I know that things are not working effectively for their interests, should I not talk about them? But you see people saying, it is not only education, it is not only this one, it is this and that, and things do not go the way you intend it to go. But there is nothing you can do. And when I come out of the Federal Executive Council, my fellow teachers will say, Agada, so you have gone there and you have decided to look down on us, not knowing the effort that I was making there. That's why I'm saying that for us to be able to implement our intentions, let, the intention be all over. Let government give us, give the various institutions what is meant for them. And of course, the institutions too should also be cautious so that what is given to them is used judiciously, not when issues of corruption and things and that are there. Then government will get angry that after all we are releasing money, but we are not seeing the effect of this money. All these things go together to work properly. Then finally, the issue of a budget and, as UNESCO would have indicated that at least every country should, devote about 26% of its annual budget to education. Do we do it in our country? Somebody has reeled down, what we have had in our budgets, even reducing instead of increasing. So all these things, the problems are there, we know them. But let us have, the goodwill, and then the political will, and then the professional will, and whatever ways we can develop to make sure that we all work towards making education and literacy and illiteracy to be a thing that Nigerians will say, well, we have worked hard and we have arrived at this. Once we're able to do that, I think we will start getting it right. Thank you.
All right. That's our guest from our Lagos Network Center. I would like to thank you for being with us on the program today, Professor Jerry Agada, former Minister of State for Education, former National President of Association of Nigerian Authors, and also former headmaster and former head teacher. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much indeed.
Let's return to our Abuja studios. Professor Haladu, I would like you to speak to the issues we've talked about now, interagency cooperation and collaboration for effectiveness in tackling the rate of illiteracy in the country. What has been your experience, first at the national level and also dealing with the subnational governments?
Right. Well, I would like to say, first of all, that open in Nigeria, we think literacy can happen just on its own, forgetting that it has to be deliberately planned, it has to be deliberately staffed, and it has to be deliberately financed. There are quite a number of agencies that deal with the literacy question. More particularly those agencies that are in charge of basic education. For example, UBEC, the Universal Basic Education Commission, the commission that I head, the National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education, the Nomadic Education Commission, the state agencies for mass education, or state agencies for adult and non-formal education, the non-governmental organizations, and indeed the international development partners are more or less the agencies that deal with the issue of literacy. Well, each of the agencies or commission know their role and specific responsibilities as enshrined in their statutes or laws and statutes, and as such doing the best that they could in the circumstance they find themselves. And I would want to believe that there is more understanding and proper coordination nowadays than in the past. Before I get to the current efforts that the Federal Ministry of Education and our various commissions are doing, I would want to say that at every quarter there is the meeting of the Honorable Minister for Education and Head of Parastatals. We had one just last week, on Thursday specifically, whereby we exchange ideas, we say the kind of efforts that we are making, and there we understand ourselves and we try to collaborate with each other. And therefore, there is more synergy and cooperation between the respective parastatals that are dealing with the literacy question in the country nowadays.
Professor Haladu,
I'm sorry, Kriya. I want to drive this question further with Professor Haladu. Tell us something about, you're talking about now the interaction between the parent ministry and the agencies dealing with the literacy question. Do you have performance targets? And are there key performance indicators? If we say that more than 1/3 of Nigerians are illiterate, what do we have on the cards in terms of tackling this to say, look, over the next 3 or 4 years, we want to reduce the level to 25% and so on and so forth, and these are the things that we need to do. at the national level and also at the state level, and then, if you like, the local government level, if they are in existence?
Yeah, quite a beautiful question. First of all, the present administration is fully aware of this, the illiteracy challenge, and it is determined to tackle the problem. And that is why the Honorable Minister for Education developed the Ministerial Strategic Plan for the education sector. And pillar number 1 in the MSP is the issue of out-of-school children. And the second pillar, the mass literacy issue. And in line with the Ministerial Strategic Plan, the National Commission for Mass Literacy was the first to be proactive to ensure the faithful implementation of the MSP. And what we did when we came on board is to, first of all, develop a policy guideline for the sector. What is the role of the various stakeholders in ensuring that illiteracy is actually reduced to the barest minimum, and to also see to the development of lifelong learning. This has been approved by the National Council for Education, and we have printed copies we are currently distributing to all the stakeholders. Then secondly, how do we tackle specifically the issue of illiteracy? So we developed the operational plan for a national mass literacy program. It's a 3-year plan in line with the Ministerial Strategic Plan. And it envisaged to make 30 million Nigerians literate in a period of 3 years, 10 million each year, 5 million directly from support from the federal government of Nigeria, while the remaining 5 million from the contribution of states, local governments, NGOs, and international development partners. This we have submitted to the Federal Minister of Education, and Ireland is receiving the attention of government at the highest level. So the President Muhammad Buhari administration is fully aware of the challenge, and it is doing something to actually tackle the problem. I'm optimistic that in a couple of weeks to come, right, the federal government is going to come up with
well, the problem is not with policy or plans. Onyekole was talking about the implementation challenge. So no. how?
You see, the issue is this. We have tried to put in everything that is actually needed here in terms of the funding, in terms of the strategies for getting the funds, in terms of utilizing the funds. It is a question of political will. And I would want to believe that the government has this political will, because to tackle the multifarious development challenges facing Nigeria, literacy is key. You cannot tackle the health challenge without literacy. You cannot tackle the insecurity challenge without literacy. You cannot tackle the poverty challenge without literacy. So the government is fully aware.
Professor
so
Haladu,
it is doing something about it.
Professor Haladu.
Yes.
These kind of policy books, if you like, or publications, or printouts that we've done, we have seen this several times in the past. What Kingsley was trying to say is that to articulate policies in this country is never a problem. Professor Agada also, who was in the ministry as Minister of State for Education, did also point that out. Now, funding is one. Secondly, is implementation. This beautiful piece of work that you have done is well articulated, no doubt about that. Right. But we were talking about implementation. What are the steps being taken presently to see how this can be actualized? Because Nigerians will want it to end up, on paper.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think it is. Many things that we have had in the past are currently being changed. I think it's not a government that will deceive people. I am optimistic. If I am not, I will tell you I'm not. I am optimistic that the government is determined to actually address the illiteracy challenge. And I have no doubt in my mind that the government will do something about it, right? At the level of our commission, we are also working with all the stakeholders in the adult and non-formal education sector towards actually implementing this. We have developed a number of strategies that we are going to follow as soon as the government says, yes, here we are, and the funds are released. we are working assiduously to ensure the faithful implementation of the operational plan for the national mass literacy.
Professor Haladu, thank you very much. Professor Masamari, let's bring you in again. You've seen the new plan, the new policy. As my colleague Kirian indicated, we keep seeing things like this from time to time. And then somebody who is probably new to Nigeria would just say, oh, this is the first time they're having this, where they've been dealing with the problem of illiteracy in over the decades. And in the meantime, you'll be having agencies. Tell us something. What is missing? Is it that we are trying to tackle illiteracy at the national level, from a national perspective, or that we are not cascading our efforts sufficiently to the subnational governments? I don't know how many state governments, for instance, are keen on seeking to improve the literacy levels in their respective environments.
Well, thank you very much. I think the issue stated is very clear. We do not lack good quality policies. We lack the implementation. I was reading an article that was written by somebody, and he was comparing the releases to states and the rate of illiteracy in these states. I'm sorry, like we have acknowledged, the Northeast ranks highest in terms of illiteracy. And he was able to quantify the amount of releases from the federation account to these states compared to other states. And then the question is, what happened to their own releases that they are still having this high rate of illiteracy? And the answer can only be one: either misplaced priority or lack of priority to education and illiteracy, matters, forgetting that whatever other challenges we are having is as a result of the illiteracy level. The poverty, the insecurity, whatever you think of it, revolves around education and illiteracy. So inability to see literacy and education as central in governance is one of the reasons we have this policy lack of implementation. And I am calling on our political leaders that they should look into that. Whatever amount you are going to devote or budget or release to security apparatus, you are doing so because you fail to release half of that to education, which would have been a panacea to the security problem. So we are now treating symptoms rather than the cause. And I think we should go into treating the cause, and that is taking issues of education and literacy very serious.
Before I was going to ask the UNESCO official here, because education is on the concurrent list in Nigeria. And from your research, knowing that state governments have a lot to contribute to literacy in this country, would you say that Nigeria is on the right track, right track with, based on having a mechanism to track the movements of funds and what those funds are used for?
Thank you very much. Like I said before, the issue is implementation. The structures and grants, we have the National Commission. We are talking about literacy now. The National Commission is there. The state agencies are there. The local government and education units are there. These are structures under the non-formal education. Now, the issue of funding remains a challenge. At the state level, the states are supposed to generate their own funding because education, like we said, is on the concurrent list. The local government adult education unit, because we have local government adult education units. From my experience, under the revitalizing adult and youth literacy, most of them do not even have budget at the local government level. No budget for non-formal education. At the state level, at the agency level, the same thing. Now, the issue of, I know the Executive Secretary will want to speak if opportunity is granted, the issue of the UB fund, the 2% consolidated fund. How many state agencies are actually assessing that fund? It's a challenge.
That's right.
And then again, in addition to issues, now the issue of political will. There was a local government chairman who was telling us that his priority was not about adults who will soon die away. you can now begin to imagine the magnitude of lack of political will.
All right, Mr. Stephen Onyekwelu, National Program Officer on Revitalizing Adult and Youth Literacy in Nigeria of UNESCO. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
We also would like to thank Professor Musa Mesemari, who's Dean Faculty of Education here at the University of Abuja. Professor Mesemari, pleasure to have you. And the Executive Secretary, National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education, Professor Abba Haladu. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the program. We're going on a short break now, but just one parting shot on this particular subject, because we have another topic to take. We were told, you know, many decades ago that if we had a phenomenal growth in the mass media, and then you also have many more agencies for literacy and education. Today you have the social media, you have many more radio and television stations. In the meantime, our illiteracy level is rising. All right, we'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with an issue, the census of albinos. All right, you're welcome back, but if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, just before we went on the short break, we indicated that we're having a second item for discussion. Kirian, we're having two guests here with us, but let's just pop into the subject matter by giving a background first.
Now, considering the importance of data to national development, the Albino Foundation, in collaboration with the European Union and the federal government of Nigeria, is conducting a baseline survey to ascertain the number of persons with albinism in Nigeria.
Now, the project commenced yesterday, Thursday, with field enumerators as persons with albinism will gather. That's to say they will gather, of course, the demographic and socio-economic data of persons who have albinism in Nigeria. So we have two guests here with us to shed light on this project. That's, if you like, a census of albinos. That's just to put it straightforwardly. First would like to welcome Jake Ekpele, as the founder and CEO of the Albino Foundation of Nigeria. Jake, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, sir, and good morning, Nigeria.
Also here with us is Damian Ivom, his project lead of the Albino Foundation. Ivom, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
All right. Now, tell us something, Jake Ekpele, about the essence of the baseline survey for persons with albinism in Nigeria. What is it all about? And,
well, generally speaking, baseline study is a necessity for all shades of people and even the economy and every sector. And so the essence of it for us is to be able to know the number of persons with albinism so that there'll be proper planning both at the international level and at the national level. And at the local level, we want to know how many of us are in the local government, how many of us are in the state, how many of us are in the nation. You know, it's a very, very important project to us, very dear to us, something we've been agitating for, and the first of its kind, if I may say globally. I think this is the first time a nation is embarking on a project like this.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Now to Damian, what scope are we looking at, with respect to this survey question?
Thank you very much. We are looking at gathering, if possible, all persons with albinism within the 6 geopolitical zones. Though it's going to be for the whole country, but for now, based on what we have as a financing, we'll target 6 states covering the 6 geopolitical zones. These states are Adamawa, Kogi, Enugu, Kano, Lagos, Cross River, and FCT. So these are the states we are looking at.
In other words, this is not a nationwide enumeration, or if you like, or census of persons with albinism.
It is, but based on the availability of funds we have, we are looking at these states for now. As time goes on, we'll look at other states too. By the next 2-3 years, we'll cover all the states of the Federation. That's what we're looking at.
Now, Jake, what kind of information are the enumerators going to ask? And what Damian has said, one wonders how you could get to the nook and cranny of this country because I know in the localities there are albinos there. What is the plan?
Well, that's the essence of sensitization like this. Already we're getting some red flags, and we're saying to everybody who is watching, if you are within these states and you have a brother or a cousin with albinism, the numbers will scroll on the screen. The uniqueness of this is that we're using persons with albinism. They've been trained as enumerators, supervised by National Population Commission, and they're there in the field with us. Some of our partners like NBS will also join.
What is NBS? Is
National Bureau of Statistics. Yes. You know, so these are two very important bodies. So, very good question, Cyril. What we're saying is, if you are a person with albinism, you live in Enugu State, Adamawa, all of this state, please call the numbers that you've seen on the screen so that the enumerators can actually go to even if it's a hamlet, we're prepared to go there and talk to the person. We're not just talking to just albinos alone. We're talking to parents of albinos. We're talking to friends of albinos. We want to know your pulse. We want to know what you feel about us. There's certain information that we can get from them that we can't even get from the persons with albinism. And for those of them in the field, if you encounter a person with albinism who is an illiterate, please look for somebody who is literate within that sphere. So that that person can give you that information. If you can speak Hausa, speak Hausa. If you can speak Igbo, speak Igbo. If you can speak Yoruba, speak Yoruba. Look for somebody who can get us so that we can mine this information. You know.
Jake, a moment ago, the contacts and the numbers came up on our screen, but only three of the chapters have been shown. If you take a look at the screen now, you see Cross River is there, you see Kano State is there, Adamawa is there.
No,
now, which are the other states?
There are others. I think they need to
so maybe you mentioned that which are the other states now? Let's say
Damien.
We have Adamawa State.
Adamawa is there already.
We have Enugu State.
Okay.
We have Kogi State.
Okay.
We have FCT here. We have Lagos State, Cross River State. These are the states we are working on.
All right. So again, for the benefit of our viewers, the states that you didn't see on the screen, I'm sure that perhaps before we wrap up this conversation, you will get the names and then the contacts. Lagos is involved. Lagos is, of course, is heavily populated. You mentioned Kano.
Yes,
Kano. These are also heavily populated states in general. Kogi and Enugu. So Enugu and the Federal Capital Territory. What kind of information would the enumerators be seeking to elicit from the registrants?
What kind of albinism you have? You know there are two kinds of albinism. There is ocular albinism and there is oculocutaneous albinism.
What's the difference?
The difference is in ocular. Funny enough, you can be as dark as my good friend Cyril. I'm not saying you are.
This is Kirian Umayo.
Kirian, sorry, Kirian. Yes. Sorry, I haven't seen him for some time, that's why. You know, my good friend, and yet you have albinism. The future is in the eyes. That's what makes you ocular, you know. Then there is oculocutaneous, which is myself. You don't look no further. I am oculocutaneous. And then within oculocutaneous, we have OCA1, OCA2, OCA3, OCA4. So we want to know, it's more or less like aggregated data. We want to pick out what are your types. If they don't know, if they are oculocutaneous and they don't know their types, you know, there are other features, you know, what is your fairness, the shade of your color, you know, the routing of your eyes, you know, the lesions on your skin, the freckles on your skin, you know. Does your grandparents, do you have any person with albinism within the family?
History.
Yes, we want to know the history. Then are you working?
We have time constraint now. I was going to ask you one question. Do you have the manpower to do this?
Yes, we do. We do. The people have been trained. The EU had provided some kind of funding. The federal government is giving us their platform.
Yvonne, how long will the exercise last?
It will last
started yesterday?
Yes, the 21st of this month. 10 days period.
Are you sure you can hit all of this in 10 days? You cover Lagos in 10 days? You cover Kano?
We have the instrument.
One good thing about this is that we have a database of persons with albinism within all these states. we have members. And these members...
Okay, but time can allow us to continue. But perhaps you may have another opportunity of coming to do this. And at this point, we'd like to thank Jake Ebele, founder and CEO of the Albino Foundation. Thank you, Jake, for coming. We hope you have another opportunity to enlighten Nigerians on this.
Maybe at the end of the project, we'll come and tell you.
All right. And of course, Damian Ivom, project leader of Albino Foundation. Thank you for being part of the foundation program.
Thank you so much.
All right. And, well, let's go ahead now with entertainment. Well, sports. Let's take sports. And that's our show today on Good Morning Nigeria. We'd like to thank you for being part of it. My name is Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osalolo. I joined Kirian in appreciating your being with us. Good Morning Nigeria returns on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Before then, have a wonderful weekend and enjoy your day.